What is the best spec for rogues? That is a question I get every single day, whether I'm streaming and I always get that question from a viewer, whether I'm checking out the comment section and somebody always asks, hey Dal, I just picked up Rogue, or I decided to boost a Rogue, or I decided to start playing my Rogue again. What is the best spec in BFA? In this video, I just want to kind of try to answer that question as best as I can. One thing I noticed though, every time I get this question from viewers, sometimes it comes from viewers of different walks of life. One might be somebody who's just trying to pick up Rogue, never played it before, and they want to figure out what's going to be the most enjoyable spec to level. Other people want to figure out what's going to be the best spec for highest damage in Mythic bosses or raids, and others want to be the spec that stomps everybody in Battlegrounds for PvP or Arena. So in this video, I'll try to answer the question of what is going to be the best spec of Rogue, depending on the different types of people that have asked me this question, to help all of you guys figure out which spec might be the best for you, or help you figure out which spec is the best that you want to play. I will say this though off the bat, if you want to be the best at Rogue, if you're someone who decided to main Rogue, that's what you should do. Main the class, not the specs. If your question is to figure out which spec is the most fun, which spec is the best, if you just want to play it casually or just want to invest all your time into one spec, maybe you have a job where you just cannot play and try every different spec, that's fine. But if you decide you want to be the best at Rogue in general and you're trying to figure out the best spec, then I feel like the best answer is to learn all three specs like the back of your hand, and then this way you'll become more of a well-rounded player. You'll become more of a Rogue player rather than just Assassination player or Subtlety player or Outlaw player, but rather a Rogue player. So if you decide you want to be the best at Rogue and you want to main it, that's probably going to be the best advice for anybody who wants to go hardcore with this class. Anyway, let's actually get into the video now. A good chunk of you guys asking me which spec of Rogue is the best, asking me which is the best to level, which spec should you try first, what spec of Rogue is going to introduce you to what the class is all about. When you're first time leveling a Rogue, it's your first experience ever, honestly, don't worry about these things. Don't worry about DPS, don't worry about the utility you're going to bring in a raid, don't worry about utility you'll bring into PvP. Just, if it's your first time, just enjoy the class, and that's something a lot of people forget to do. Try the different specs, as all of them have a different flavor, and I feel like Blizzard, through Legion as well as BFA, has helped craft these three different specs and give them a whole different feel. I feel like it's the best to experiment with different specs while you level. Hell, maybe you'll like Assassination, deadly ruthless assassin with vendetta against anyone who steps in his way, using bleeds and poisons to leave a trail of bodies behind, cold, heartless, and calculated. Or maybe you want to be more of a planned, more of an ambush type of a rogue. You want to craft yourself the best plan possible as Subtlety. You might not have the best energy regen like everybody else, but when you put a plan together, you can deal insane burst damage in the opener. So if you're someone who likes preparation and scheming, the spec of Subtlety might be the best for you. The assassin that hides in the shadows. Or if you're someone who's just a straight up brawler, you're not really a huge fan of the stealth, but you would rather be able to stay toe to toe with a target, and if you don't mind cheating by pulling out a concealed weapon under your jacket, then Outlaw might be the best for you. Actually, I feel like the whole party aspect of Outlaw has been pretty great, and really does feel like it's a toe to toe dueler brawler type of spec that doesn't really rely on stealth, but rather on guile and quick wits. The best part when you first get introduced to rogues when leveling, just enjoy all the different specs. Grab as many weapons as you can. Grab a pair of daggers so you can play Assassination and Subtlety, and grab some heavier weapons, maces, axes, swords, or even fists, and you can play yourself some Outlaw and enjoy it while you level. And the best part is, just enjoy it while you go. Find a spec that you like and experiment a lot. Now, there's a good chunk of you guys that are just coming back into the game. Maybe you played back in Legion or in previous expansions and you just boosted a rogue. You just got to level 120. Where should you start? You're trying to figure out how rogue plays at endgame and you never really spend the time leveling the spec. Which spec is going to be the best for you? I personally feel that Assassination Rogue is going to be the best spec for you to start with. Assassination is kind of known as the jack of all trades right now in the rogue community. I feel like the spec does just about everything. It has good sustain, it has good burst without having to compromise for either one. It has bursty abilities, but also damage over time playstyle. It dabbles a little bit in openers, but not as heavily as Subtlety. And it has a good energy regen, but not quite as ridiculous as Outlaw, and your abilities are pretty expensive, so when you get used to the energy regeneration, you will be adapted to what Outlaw and Subtlety will be playing with. Also, when you're gearing as a fresh new 120 character in BFA, any kind of gear you come across is an upgrade, because Assassination is in the spot where every single trait, every single point of agility, every single secondary stat, whether it's versatility, mastery, crit, and haste, are all a damage increase. You're not quite as picky as the other specs, so you'll always see a character improvement and damage improvement no matter what piece of gear you pick up from world quests. Eventually, you're probably gonna want to get into raids as a rogue. Right now, they're very much wanted. If you look at the chart right now, you'll see that rogues are in the top half of all the different classes, so we're nowhere near the bottom. We're very overrepresented and we're very much wanted in a lot of the raids. But which spec should you commit to, or which spec should you play when it comes to raiding, especially if you just want to pick one? Looking at this chart, you might make the wrong assumption and say, it looks like Subtlety is at the top and Assassination is at the bottom, so I'm obviously going to play Subtlety and avoid Assassination at all cases. I would say that you're wrong. Depending on the fight, the specs of rogues are always going to fluctuate. Like for example, you have Subtlety, which is really good at swapping targets and really good if you need burst of damage into a boss rather than consistent damage. So if you can't always hit the boss, as long as you can nail the burst, your damage should be pretty decent. Also, if you have a bunch of enemies around you, you use your Shuriken Storm Eviscerate combo and get insane damage like a lot of rogues are getting, up to 40k DPS by the end of the fight on Zul. Or if you have a fight with a lot of cleave and a lot of AoE, if you always have two targets you can consistently cleave at all times, Outlaw might be the best spec for you, or the spec that needs the most mobility. So it all depends what spec you end up playing. And even though Assassination is kind of dropping at the bottom of the row out of all three specs of rogues, rogues still are doing insanely well. I feel like if you're someone who is brand new to rogues, and you're trying to find the best starter spec, at least for raids, I feel like learning Assassination is going to be a good go. Assassination is a jack of all trades, but in a sense it's not really a master of any. You don't really have specialized playstyles like Outlaw that is really strong in certain fields while lacking in others. You don't have Subtlety that's extremely strong in certain fields but also weak in others. Instead you have Assassination that's it's kind of more or less balanced. It's kind of more or less balanced and works for any fight in some capacity. It is the nice middle ground, and it's pretty decent for pure single target fights. If you're thinking of playing Rogue for raids, I feel like looking into Subtlety and Outlaw is going to be the way to go, but if you want to first start out with just get your feet wet, start with Assassination in the raid environment. Now when you take a look at Mythic Plus, oh boy does it literally flip. You have Assassination, what looks like at the very top. The second one to be represented is Outlaw, and the worst one is Subtlety? Wasn't Subtlety the best and most represented spec for Mythic Plus dungeons in Legion? With the changes that came out to all the different specs, taking away legendaries, taking away the artifact weapons, and replacing them with traits, the specs have been feeling a little bit different. Assassination is popular, and I think I know why. It's because it is the one spec that's very non-offensive. When you're doing Mythic Pluses, you're trying to build together a team. You're trying to make sure all the classes in that team synergize together. When you bring Outlaw, you bring in a class or spec that's very front load heavy on add damage, but during boss is just sustain. It's not really bursty, and maybe there's moments where you need that burst. Assassination has a bit more of burst and sustain for adds, not quite as heavily as Outlaw, but decent. But it also has pretty decent with burst and sustain for boss fights. A little bit more burst than Outlaw, so most people will bring it as like the staple. I mean, of course, if you have a team that knows what they're doing, and if they understand, let's say, how Subtlety plays, Subtlety can have the best single target damage possible in a boss fight, as long as everybody knows not to cleave the adds, and let Subtlety use those adds to just build a load of combo points. So, depending on the fight, depending on the setup, certain specs can shine as always, but I feel like Assassination is just that one that's inoffensive that a lot of people can easily synergize with. Regardless which spec you play though, even though I think for this one we'll say Assassination is going to be the most inoffensive one to run and most synergetic with a lot of different classes. No matter what spec you play, most people are going to be happy to have a rogue, because all three specs of rogues bring exactly the same utility, which makes them so valuable. And if you ever thought, oh man, I always get declined from dungeons as a rogue, ever try running Tol Dagor, the dungeon that basically requires a rogue? So if you ever feeling like you have a bad day, maybe like nobody wants you in their groups, just queue for Tol Dagor. Everybody's gonna want to be happy with a rogue around. When it comes to PvP, I feel like this one is going to be probably the most boring one. If you are trying to find the easiest spec to push high rated, probably Assassination. The problem that I have with Assassination though for PvP, I mean, I guess it's fun and I guess it's doable and it does a lot of damage, which is the advantage for it. It just pumps a lot of damage. I feel like in PvP, what I like about PvP is different than raids. In raids, you're all trying to keep up your DPS. In raids, you're trying to maximize how much your damage output is for adds and bosses. In raids, you're going to be practicing and basically smacking around a training dummy. So when I do raids and I go into PvP, I don't want to have exactly the same experience, which is why I'd rather personally play something like Subtlety or Outlaw. I love the idea of being able to have some cross CC and very CC heavy plays, which is exciting for PvP. Because for Assassination, whether you're hitting a raid boss or whether you're training down a healer, your rotation and your playstyle is gonna stay mostly the same. Now there is some ways for Assassination to make some plays, but it's definitely not as heavy and as crazy as Subtlety and Outlaw. And depending on the player, Assassination might not be quite as exciting for PvP as Subtlety and Outlaw. Subtlety is actually one of the specs that's a little behind for PvP, which is a little bit weird because the spec in the recent times have been so good for PvP, but right now it simply doesn't deal the best sustained damage. But in PvP, well, the best part about playing whatever spec of rogue you want to is you can play with teams, you can play with comps. So in 2v2 and 3v3, you can find classes that complement your strengths and make up for your weaknesses, where you can make a comp around a certain spec, and it can work no matter what you choose to play. For example, if you are Subtlety, you are a spec rogue that's very heavy on crowd control. So classes that have a lot of crowd control as well are very synergetic, like a mage. Also, you don't really have a lot of good sustained damage, so burst damage is where it's going to be at. So with a mage, you can get some cross CC where the whole team is crowd controlled, stun locked, blinded, polymorph, whatever you want to give it, and then just burst someone down with massive DPS. No matter who you play against with all that crowd control, eventually they'll run out of trinkets and you'll be able to outplay the enemy team. Outlaw is a little bit different. It does bring a trait for your Thick as Thieves, where your Tricks trait buffs the damage of whoever you're playing with by 15%, which can allow for some hilarious Mongo comps. Like imagine a Fury Warrior bursting down your healer with an Outlaw Rogue buff. I mean, that alone can be pretty spooky. Overall, I feel like all three specs of rogues are viable for PvP, and it's really up to you which one you want to play, but we will say that yes, the jack of all trades, as in the other builds, the easier mode for PvP is going to be Assassination. While a simplistic spec, which isn't something I want to look forward to, it is an easier one to start with, and an easier one, more straightforward in terms of gearing, in terms of traits, in terms of, well, just about everything, to make it successful for PvP environments. So if you do want an easy option, Assassination, I guess, is there for you. So it does sound like if you are a Subtlety Rogue or Outlaw Rogue main, or you're hoping that those specs would be great, you're probably thinking, oh, this is doom and gloom. Dal has recommended Assassination in every single field. I don't think you should just say, yeah, Assassination is going to be the way I go for, unless it's a spec you like. I've always been somebody who, I guess you could say I've been a little bit weird all my life. Everybody always follows the trends. A lot of people follow the pack, they follow the herd and follow the lines, and right now I guess the popularity for Assassination Rogue is what everybody is doing. You'll find so many people playing the spec. You'll find the herd going with Assassination. I've just never really been like that. I've always been the kind of person that turned around. If everybody's following a line, I'm gonna do 180 and walk in the other direction. I always like going against the grain, and that's why I like Outlaw. I originally started playing Outlaw in Legion because, well, they took away combat and I wanted to give Outlaw a go. I wasn't sure if I will stick with Outlaw, but when I saw the spec underperforming in some areas, I was like, yes, this is going to be the spec I will play. It is the least popular. I think I'm just going to try to get really good at it because it's a lot more fun and enjoyable to be something that not everybody else is, well, even decent at. But now with BFA, even if Outlaw became, for example, the most popular spec in the game, like everybody in the mother was playing it, I already like the spec. I probably will continue playing it. I feel like that's pretty important, and not a lot of people follow this anymore, but being able to play a spec that you simply like, you just like how it plays, you like how it runs, you just like it. So you play it just because you like it. I don't know, maybe that's just not as important out there. A lot of people like to be the top DPS, the best at this, the best at that, but I guess maybe the idea of playing something that you like kind of out of fashion. So that's the reason why I play Outlaw. But I guess it's really up to you guys to decide which spec or rogue would you want to play. I hopefully gave you guys as much of ideas and as many different options as I can for where all these specs are good at, whether it's PvE or PvP. And hopefully I gave you guys a little bit of an idea where you can start with when it comes to figuring out which rogue spec you want to get into, whether it's just a casual alt on the side or a spec or a class you want to main from now on in Battle for Azeroth. Whichever spec you end up going for, all three rogue specs are insanely good and insanely strong right now, so I think a lot of you guys will be happy with the way that we're at and kind of where we currently are in the meta for raids, Mythic Plus, or PvP. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always guys, if you like this video, give it a like. Likes allow my videos to reach a wider audience, so that'll be very much helpful. And if you guys enjoy rogue videos or any kind of updates on BFA, subscribe to the channel for more of that on here. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you guys in another video. In some sense, I feel like Assassination is, as I called it before, a jack of all trades. I feel like it just has a lot of the aspects that can make it work for PvE and PvP, whether you're trying to be casual at it for raids and mythic classes, or you want to go hardcore into the mythic dungeons and the mythic raids. Whether you want to PvP just for battlegrounds and just kind of enjoy a spec that pumps a lot of damage, or if you want to go and push for really high rating, I feel like Assassination ticks a lot of these check marks. But I feel like there's also one more check mark we haven't talked about, and that is all about choosing a spec and maximizing for it. I feel like this one is probably one of the more difficult choices that a lot of you guys could make. You might just have a spec that you just love in terms of the playstyle. You feel like whatever the abilities are, it just rings to you. It's your favorite. You would rather not be playing any spec if you can't play the one you enjoy right now. So it's a possibility that you could just play whatever you want and just gear yourself and use the gear, which in BFA can in some cases be used to help out make for some of your weaknesses. For example, Outlaw can be a spec without any burst, but with some Azeroth traits you can actually have some really bursty single target damage. And with certain traits you can even eliminate the RNG playstyle of Roll the Bones, giving you a little bit more consistency that you didn't have for the spec. Same thing for Subtlety. Subtlety is mostly a spec that's not great on sustain, but with certain Azeroth traits and certain talent builds, you can make yourself one of the better specs for sustain damage. Your burst will suffer, but you can sustain in a long-term fight where you can stay on the boss for a very, very long while. Both of those specs can be great, and especially when you min-max. If you get the right traits, the right trinkets, the right perfect stats, you can do whatever the hell you want. And I feel like in some sense there's a bit more of that feeling of accomplishment when you do. For example, nobody expects for me as an Outlaw Rogue to perform well in certain situations, and when I break all expectations, it's super exciting. Same thing can be for any of the other specs that are generally not seen as the top, or the average, or the flavor of the month. But that's really up to you guys to decide from here on what spec do you think is going to be the best for you. Example for me, Outlaw just stuck with me ever since Legion. It's been a playstyle that I enjoyed. I like the Roll the Bones mechanic, and I really don't mind the RNG aspects of the spec. I actually quite enjoy it, and I think it's kind of well put together. I love the feel of the Outlaw Rogue. The fact that I have a ranged stun grappling hook is super fun to play with, and yeah, that's really about it. Some of you guys said before that, wow, that sounds very simplistic. You're just playing a spec just because you like it, and it's like, yeah, I don't know, man. It's a simple answer, but I like it. I've never been the kind of person, I've always been the weird one where everybody likes to follow the line, everybody likes to follow the pack, and when I see everybody going in the same direction, I just like to turn the opposite and just go against the grain. I've always been like that, so maybe that's why Outlaw Rogue fits me. But maybe for you guys, whatever you want to do, Assassination or Subtlety or even Outlaw might be the best spec for you. I guess it's all up to you guys to decide, or if you want to go with a cheat sheet and go with a jack of all trades, you're more than welcome to. Hopefully this video gave you guys a bit of an idea where rogues are at and helped you decide which spec rogue you want to play for Battle for Azeroth, at least for patch 8.0.1. Hopefully this video was detailed enough to help you guys figure out which spec you want to play, or maybe even which spec you want to alt, and hopefully give you guys an idea where all three specs stand, whether it is PvE or PvP environments. Thank you all so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.